Good morning, Chicago Cubs fans. We are back with another edition of Cubs Daily. My name is Steve, and Ryan, I'm going to pitch to you another potential trade option for the Cubs. Not in terms of who we're going to get, but in terms of how to make more flexibility in this roster. A couple more names that the Cubs are closer linked to now that Dylan Cease is off the board, etc. And of course, it's Friday here in the offseason, so you guys know we're going to do some viewer comments. But before we get into all that good stuff, I just want to give everyone a big thank you again from the bottom of my heart, continuing to show support on the channel, sharing your thoughts in the comments section. I really do enjoy hearing all the different perspectives in this group. We're building a fun community here on Cubs Daily, so let's keep it rolling. If you guys want to join in on the action, please hit that subscribe button, like the video, and of course, share your thoughts down in the comments whether you agree with me or not. You don't have to agree with me by any means. I want to hear it. I love learning different angles on things. It helps me become a better overall Cubs fan, baseball fan, and broadcaster to you guys as well. So let's hop right on into it. I'm going to pitch something here. I talked about it in an earlier episode, not this specifically, but, I said, hey, Nico Corner might be a potential trade option. How about Seiya Suzuki, huh? What if we were to opt in to trade him? His contract does expire at the end of the season. He did just have his best season here in Chicago in 2025. Let's take a look at some of those numbers, really quickly here. So Seiya Suzuki, guys, he popped off. He still only had a 2.6 WAR. It was mostly because of the bat. He didn't play much right field except towards the end when Kyle Tucker was out. But yeah, he hit 245. He hit 32 home runs, which was a career year for him. And he drove in 103 RBIs. Again, though, this is my whole point with Kyle Tucker. Not saying the Cubs have to re-sign him by any means, ladies and gentlemen, but it's my whole point with Kyle Tucker, okay? Kyle Tucker makes other people better by proxy. His approach at the plate was amazing last year. Did the numbers necessarily fit what he normally does? No, I'm not defending any of that by any means. But if you watched him every single day, and I'll be honest with you guys, I probably watched at least 150 to 155 of those games. Sometimes I couldn't. Sometimes I was at work, but I would follow it on game day. And you could just see his approach, right? He might go down 0-2, 1-2 quickly, but he'd always battle back to 2, 3-2, 2-2. He'd foul off pitches. Bare minimum, that pitcher was throwing 6 to 7 pitches per AB with Kyle Tucker. He would annoy the pitcher. And honestly, he left the batter in front of him and the batter behind him more pitches to hit because that pitcher did not want to deal with Kyle Tucker. Even when he was hurt, they didn't want to deal with him and necessarily get him rolling again because that's how they know, right? When Kyle Tucker was healthy, that's when this offense was elite. It was special. It gave us a lot of different helps, and it kind of changed our trajectory and our thought process on the 2025 season. Obviously, the second half didn't work out in that same sense, but I don't think Seiya Suzuki is necessarily going to do what he just did. And that's kind of my whole issue with the front office this offseason is they're kind of not letting Kyle Tucker go. I think Kyle Tucker's just going to go get paid, and we don't want to pay him, and that's whatever. Like, that's just, how we operate. But to say there and sit there, like, you think these guys are just going to recreate and do what they did last year, that is not true necessarily. Do I think Pete Crow Armstrong has the talent to do what he did last year? Yes. Do I think he's going to do it again this specific season? The jury's still out on that, guys. Baseball is a very up and down game. We always talk about averages and, all that other stuff, but the averages, that's what it is. It's an average. It doesn't mean it's never a direct result of what happened, if you know what I'm saying, right? Like, if you hit 300, right, you hit 3 out of every 10 at bats, but that means, some days you went 0 for 4, and then the next day you went 2 for 3, and then the next day you went 1 for 3, right? Like, that means you're hitting 300. But, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a generalization of your day-to-day action. And it's not necessarily indicative of your performance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so I'm very nervous that a few of the Cubs players this season are going to regress. Do I think they could absolutely do better? Yes. But I think we are undervaluing the impact that Kyle Tucker had on this lineup, okay? Michael Busch, career season. Now, he's young enough that he could still be going upwards, but I don't know how much more upwards. How much more upwards are we going to get than 34 home runs? Now, maybe he starts driving in a lot more runs this season, right? Maybe he gets those opportunities as well. Hopefully, he starts to bat more against left-handers. Pete Crow Armstrong, maybe he makes a big-time adjustment this offseason, and he can get back to what he was doing the first half of 2025, because his two halves were just bipolar opposites, high and low in that sense. So I think Seiya Suzuki is a potential trade option, especially when you read what PJ Mooney was saying. If the Cubs are out on Kyle Tucker, which it feels like they are, I think they want to give Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros the ropes, the reins to get reps at the big league level, which is fine and dandy, but we have to commit to that, okay? So that kind of leaves an odd man out, right? Seiya Suzuki, I'm just going to say I would much rather Owen Casey get those reps in right field, and I would much rather Moises Ballesteros get those reps at DH. Do I think that might be a regression? Yes, it's very, very possible in terms of what our offense looks like, but I do know one thing about the Cubs. Our defense is still going to be really good, and our pitching is going to be solid. Maybe not the best in the big leagues, but it's going to be solid. So I'm not sure what teams are interested in Seiya Suzuki, but I think it's a name that we need to keep our eye out for in terms of potential trade players that could be traded from this roster. I'm not sure what people are going to give us for them. Maybe some mid-AA, AAA players. I don't know. But if we're truly on the Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros getting the reins road, then that kind of leaves Seiya Suzuki as the odd man out, right? He's our right fielder and our DH sometimes. So maybe he's a flexibility option. But, again, I don't want Owen Casey sitting on the pine. I don't want Moises Ballesteros sitting on the pine. I want those guys out in the field because that is the only way they're going to help the Cubs. Maybe not in 2026, but in whatever we get of 2027, 2028, and so on and so forth. So, back to a couple of names that I think the Cubs are just kind of gearing up. This is what it kind of feels like we're gearing up for, right? It was reported earlier today that we're going to have about 50 to 60 million in money to spend, okay? Now, we didn't want to spend 30 million on Dylan Cease, and that's our prerogative. Apparently, we were in on it, but, classic Cubs, we just didn't pull the trigger, or we didn't want to do the deferral money or whatever, and that's a whole different video and a whole different subject, because apparently John Heyman talked about how we were one of the 5 teams for Shohei Ohtani. We didn't want to do what he wanted, and again, I understand you're the organization, and it's a blessing to play for you. But sometimes there's players out there that you just have to abide for, okay? Bill Belichick let Lawrence Taylor sleep in practice. Because you know what Lawrence Taylor did on Sundays? He messed up the other team's offense tremendously, and on a regular basis. All right, back to the side. Back to the regular programming, sorry. Just that doesn't seem like a match necessarily. It just kind of feels like Michael King is going to be a Cub, and he's going to be the second or third man in our rotation. Hopefully, he can stay healthy with us. He was pretty solid last year, but again, nothing to crow home about. But he's had really good seasons, and you guys know how we do in this pitching lab. We are able, he's not even a reclamation project. I don't even know why I'm saying it like that, but we are able to make adjustments on players and get them right. And maybe Shota figured out what was going on last year. That's why Tommy Hyde, if he's excited. And again, this rotation could be dynamic, okay? Very dynamic with Colin Ray and Javier Assad as kind of those flex options in the bullpen, just in case a blowout happens. Maybe, our rotation's out of whack and we need a spot starter. We got a couple of those guys, okay? We got a couple of those guys as well. So, let's talk about Alex Bregman real quick, because it says there are reports saying the Cubs are interested in the third baseman. And again, this is per our man PJ Mooney. He has been dropping a lot of hints on the Cubs right here. Cubs have renewed interest in Alex Bregman. Now, that was according to the New York Times article, and honestly, I don't have access to that, and I'm not going to pay for that, but here we go again with these rumors, right? Could Alex Bregman be a good fit? Do I think he replaces Kyle Tucker in the aggregate directly? No. But do I think he shortens the gap? Absolutely. Absolutely, Alex Bregman would shorten the gap from what we're going to be missing with Kyle Tucker, okay? But he did get hurt last year, and that kind of hampered his power. But again, he only hit 18 home runs. It's kind of like what Kyle Tucker did, right? 22 home runs. The numbers were a lot more similar than we want to believe. But again, this offense did really, really well, because of the presence of them in the lineup. So if Alex Bregman could bring that presence to Wrigley Field, bring it to this lineup, could have the same effect maybe. And maybe PCA and Michael Busch and all those other guys, we don't necessarily have to, lose a step with them. And, that does open the door for what happens with Matt Shaw. Again, we talked about it last week, right? They trade Nico Hoerner. I'm not for it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just talking to you about the pathways out. Because the odds are, if you're between these two players, Nico Hoerner and Matt Shaw, as much as I love Nico Hoerner, and I love Nico Hoerner, ladies and gentlemen, I want him to be a Cub for the rest of his life. It just feels like this regime is going to go with Matt Shaw. We have a lot more control of him. He can play second base, and we're hoping that the bat develops behind him. But the problem with that is it's very hard to find surefire bats in baseball, and Nico is absolutely a surefire bat. He's going to hit near 300 every season, and he's going to play Gold Glove defense. It really doesn't get much better than that. He was coming off a 3-year, $35 million extension. Just give him a raise. Give him what he deserves. Even if it's 3 years, $60 million, I am okay with that. Nico Hoerner can play ball, and I want him on this team, ladies and gentlemen. He runs the bases oh so well. And again, a part of this team that we really didn't talk about last season is how well they run the bases. And yeah, I think Alex Bregman, you plop him in the 2 or 3 hole in this lineup. You put again. I think Nico should be batting second. Michael Busch leadoff. As it sits right now, it would be PCA and Seiya Suzuki probably alternating 3 and 4. And then we got a lot of questions. And that's where I think Alex Bregman would fit in nicely with this lineup. Putting him in 3, 4, and 5 and having that rotation of Seiya and, PCA. Now, if we trade Seiya, like I was talking about earlier, that's where Owen Casey steps in, right? That's where Moises Ballesteros steps in. Kind of just getting more depth in that lineup. And I'm okay with Matt Shaw batting 9th again, right? And we'll have Miguel Amaya and Dansby Swanson going 7 and 8. And that's kind of how it's going to go. And Ian Happ, I think, should bat 6. Like, that's how I feel about this lineup. But, I'm not the one making the decisions here. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the best time of the week here in Cubs Daily. We are going to talk about some of your comments, some of you guys' comments here in the show. I really, really do appreciate every single one of you dropping your thoughts. And honestly, most of these comments are from last week's viewer comment show. So continue to share them, ladies and gentlemen. Starting in this video right here, share your thoughts, ask a question. It could be featured in next Friday's episode of Cubs Daily, which I'm beyond excited to continue doing. Continue to share your thoughts throughout all the videos. And again, the more questions, the longer I can make these videos, the more fun we can have, right? So I did pick 3 for this week, but let's just hop right into it, all right? Graphic number 1. I'm going to expand this a little bit. Here we go. So we got Todd McCombs. He's talking about topics, okay? He's giving me some topics. So Todd, shout out to you, man. Hope you're doing well. Other alternatives to a salary cap, okay? Because remember, that's the pressing issue going into 2027, right? With the lockout, we're going to have some salary cap issues. In this scenario, he's talking about some penalties, and I'm not against that. I'm not necessarily against that. So he said, 1, every $20 million you go over the cap, team loses a player off their 40-man roster for the season. Example: Dodgers this year, 40-man roster is now 35 because they're $100 million over the salary cap. Every player lost off the 40-man roster team needs to pay $5 million to player association. Example: Dodgers pay $25 million in fine. Sorry, this is the second option. Every player's lost off the 40-man roster, so the Dodgers would pay $25 million in fines to the player association. Now, Todd, if you can comment back here on this video, would these two be in the same thing? Would this be like one and the same? And then 3, if you pick a player in the Rule 5 draft, you need to keep them on the 40-man roster. Keep the other rules in effect and add these. Interested in the opinions on the subject. So, Todd, as for your third one, they have to be on the Major League roster. That's what's supposed to happen. The Cubs did that with Gage Workman. We took him in the Rule 5 draft last year, and unfortunately, he just didn't hack it. He just wasn't even nearly good enough to be on the team, and so we couldn't send him down to AAA. we had to either trade him or he would go back to the Tigers. We traded him to the White Sox, and he still wasn't good, so we had to go back to the Tigers in the end. And that's kind of the rule with the Rule 5 draft, right? Certain players reach a certain point in their tenure and their player eligibility. Again, I could give you better clarification on this on a different episode, but, for example, this is my whole point about why we have to trade some of these guys, right? Like Kevin Alcantara. He's got to be on a Major League roster here soon. James Triantos, the same thing. He has got to be on a Major League roster soon, and our infield is loaded. I've heard comps of him being a Nico Hoerner type player too. So could he replace Nico Hoerner? I don't know. But again, my only issue is I don't want to replace Nico Hoerner with another Nico Hoerner because we have Nico Hoerner, right? Do you guys remember the NFL draft, right? The Titans traded A.J. Brown to the Eagles, and then they drafted Treylon Burks, whose player comp was A.J. Brown. Why wouldn't you just keep A.J. Brown? I understand the money and obviously all the things that come with it, but why would we want to trade Nico Hoerner when we already have Nico Hoerner, right? There's no need to do such a thing. So, yeah, it's a little pressing, a little confusing for me, but again, I'm not against that necessarily. I do think, maybe the Dodgers need to feed the rest of the league in the sense, but we have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that the salary cap is not necessarily about the richest teams spending all the money. It's really more about having these lesser teams like the Reds, the Pirates, the Marlins, building up the floor, right? Like, so if the salary cap, let's say, is $200 million, the floor needs to be at least $110 million. And these owners are cheap. There's no doubt about it. You guys know it right here in this community. We already talk about how cheap the Ricketts are, right? Trust me. The grass ain't always greener on the other side, okay? There are a lot of cheap owners out there, and, that's my number one qualm with the Milwaukee Brewers. Maybe they don't have that money, actually. I don't know. But with that roster this year, the way those guys were playing, how do you not go out and get an Eugenio Suarez? How do you not go out and just try to solidify that roster in any capacity? We already complained about that for the Cubs, right? But again, I don't think there was one move that the Cubs could make that would have put them over the top. And I will bank on that with the Ricketts till the day I die. If there was a move out there that was going to put the Cubs as the number one seed, essentially, that was going to put them over the top of the Dodgers, right? That was going to put them over the top in the whole entire world of baseball, they would have pulled the trigger. They would have spent the money. I think Ricketts is willing to spend the money, but you have to be sure. And again, there is a problem with that line of thinking, right? It kind of lined up that way in 2016, right? That team was absolutely loaded to the gills, and we really needed a back-end closer. That's when we gave up the prospects to go get Aroldis Chapman, and that basically solidified our bullpen. And we were able to win the World Series in a 7-game struggle where we were down 3-1. So, nothing is guaranteed in life. Sometimes you do got to take risks, and I think that's just what we want from our ownership group. So, Todd, I'm not against these ideas. I think there's ways and loose ends to go around it from your examples. I haven't really thought about it, but I'm not against it. Just unfortunately, my thing with the Dodgers is I don't even care that the Dodgers spend all the money. Life is unfair. Life is an uneven playing field. But they don't win it every single season. Yes, they've gone back-to-back for the first time since the 70s. They don't win it every year. They spend the most money every year, but they don't win it every year. Baseball's baseball. It's in between the lines, okay? The Dodgers will lose again. We just have to be ready to strike. That's more my thought. Todd, appreciate the comment, man. Keep them coming. All right, on to the next one. Kevin Palmer says, Steven, do you think Yandy Diaz from Tampa Bay would be a good addition for the Cubs? He can play first and third and could DH at times. He's also a good contact hitter with some pop. I might have answered this question in a video, Kevin, so I do apologize, but you know what? For time's sake, let's just talk about it right here, right now. Do I think Yandy Diaz would be a good option? Abso-freaking-lutely. I'm a big fan of Yandy Diaz's game, and I really think he would kind of plug and play and replace Kyle Tucker just the way we would need him to, right? Let's take a look at some Yandy Diaz numbers here. I'm not against it. Hit 300 last year, 25 home runs, drove in 83 RBIs. Obviously, he doesn't bring the name brand that Kyle Tucker does, or that maybe a Kyle Schwarber or Alex Bregman would, but maybe that's why he'd be a perfect Cub. Maybe that's why. Maybe he would just kind of flow in here and bring in that perfect blend of everything. Now, again, it's kind of the same thing. Is he a free agent this year or next year? Is he a free agent right now? Or is he erased still? Do we have to trade for him? Okay, so I think we'd have to trade for him. He's a free agent after next season. He's a 2026 free agent. Yeah, I think he'd be a good fit for the team. My point here, though, Kevin, is if this is a target, right, why trade for him when we could sign him next offseason? When we can get him for 4 years, $90 million. I don't know how much he's even going to garner. I could be lowballing the man, but maybe next year we just sign him as a free agent, right? That he kind of fills those voids. Again, I'm starting to lean that 2026 is not necessarily like a grow year, but like a surface level year, right? Where Owen Casey and Ballesteros get to grow a little bit more. Maybe Miguel Amaya gets to be healthy for a whole season. Dansby Swanson's going to do his thing. Nico Horner's going to do his thing. Ian Happ in his final hoorah here kind of goes out with the wimp. That's kind of how it's feeling. So I think he's a good fit, but I think he'd be a better fit as a free agent, right? Where we don't lose any of our assets around us. But again, I focus on 2026. I want the 2026 Cubs to be better. If he's cheap, I'm game, right? If he's cheap in terms of prospect cost, I'm game. I know they talked about it before, like what do I think of the Kyle Tucker trade? I would do that Kyle Tucker trade 9 times out of 10. 10 times out of 10. What am I saying? 10 times. I'd do it every time. I don't think Cam Smith, we're going to regret Cam Smith. Hayden Wesneski, he's nothing. And Isaac Paredes, although he is very solid, he's a fit for Houston's ballpark. He is not a fit for Wrigley Field. We talked about that in the comment section from, I forgot the guy's name, but again, shout out to him. He was talking about the hitter profiles and stuff, so he knew what he was talking about. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's hit to the final comments here. I appreciate every single one of you hanging out with us this long. So, the Bebop Cowboy, 5 days ago. I hate you. I appreciate you, man. So glad I found your channel. This was fun for the offseason. I guess building off your story time and being a Cubs fan around the same age, shout out, and time as you're here's a fun little scenario. If you could build the starting 5 rotation of Cubs from all time, who would you pick? Okay, that is a great question. So let's actually hop on into that and get those thoughts. Now, I got a question for you. I'm going to go with a specific... I'm going to answer it like this, okay? I'm going to answer it in terms of Cubs that I, loved watching, obviously, and Cubs that I think should be on the list. I think in a separate video, Bebop, if you wanted me to be more specific, right, like 5 pitchers from 5 specific seasons, that's different. But, okay, let's start off with the obvious one. I think acing my staff would be a young Kerry Wood. I love Kerry Wood. Kerry's game was absolutely incredible. Obviously, fireballer, that curveball was unbelievable. I'm just sad I didn't get to really watch a lot of his prime. Another Cub that I would absolutely love to be on this rotation, Jake Arrieta. Jake Arrieta was the man in 2015 and 2016, and you really got to watch it grow up and happen in 2014. Things started clicking for him, but then that second half of 2015, oh my goodness. Game changer. People don't talk about that enough, about that 2016 team, about how that 2-year run by Jake Arrieta might be one of the greatest runs in baseball history. What he did, he threw 2 no-hitters, he won a Cy Young, 2-time All-Star, right? Just unbelievable pitcher. Now again, I know you guys are just saying, Steven, excuse me? No, I have not forgot about Fergie Jenkins, ladies and gentlemen. I know Fergie Jenkins and Greg Maddux are going to be in the rotation. I'm no fool, but I can't sit there and hit you with a straight face and be like, yeah, I watched him. He's the man. I know Fergie Jenkins is the man. Obviously, I want him in my rotation. I need him in my rotation. Fergie Jenkins is one of the greatest Cubs of all time. There's no doubt about that, right? 284 wins. Come on now, man. Led the league in wins in 1971, 24-13. His WAR was 10.1. Get up out of here. 25-12. That was for Texas, though. But as a Cub, obviously, he was an absolute legend. And so, Fergie Jenkins is the absolute man. And of course, Greg Maddux, right? How can you not do this list without Greg Maddux? Greg Maddux is he's the we have Kyle Hendricks, right? He's the professor. Well, he's the dean. He's the dean. I know that's not his nickname, but Greg Maddux would paint the corners. He did it off manipulation and tactic, not necessarily speed and overwhelming you. And honestly, that's kind of mad. He's the professor. What am I saying? But the professor, I feel like, is an undertaking to me. He's the head of the whole university of pitching. That's how great Greg Maddux was, right? 355 career wins, man. He's in the Hall as a Brave, but those 6-7 years as a young Cub, and even then I got to watch him as a Cub in 2006, right? 2005, 2006. He was still really, really solid. Just an incredible pitcher. And for the last one in the rotation, I might be throwing this one back, all right? Obviously when you think of things like Zambrano, things like that, I did go to Milwaukee for that no-hitter. Do I hit him with it, guys? Do I hit him with it? I think I might have to. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, guys. Mordecai Three-Finger Brown is going to be my fifth man in this rotation. Okay, Mordecai Brown, 239 and 130, 2.06 ERA. He was an absolute animal for those Cubs in the early 1900s. Again, it's a completely different game, but just kind of want to span history there as well. So that's going to wrap it up for today's video for you guys, but drop your starting five in the comment section down below. It could be players you could watch. It could even be 5 specific seasons if that's something that does interest you. So again, I appreciate everyone who takes the time to check out Cubs Daily. Listen to me yap about the Cubs. I love doing this. So again, share your thoughts down below. Hit that like button. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? The winter meetings are warming up, so I'm going to give you guys a warning, okay? There may be a video Saturday. There may not be. I'm not sure. I have to kind of delegate and do some things around the house, but there may or may not be a video Saturday. If not, we will be back Monday, no doubt about it. I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic weekend. Here in the Midwest, it is freaking cold, so stay warm. I love you all. Peace.